She went under the wheels.
How affected.
Welcome to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And in today's episode, we've got two exciting Robert Pattinson supporting role movies. We've got it's very small personal project called Tenet, and another sort of like backwaters southeast psychological-ish movie, Devil All the Time. I don't know if that's accurate for either of them. But those are the movies we have, Tenet and Devil All the Time today.
A small-scale personal project that George Lucas made in his garage. Called Tenet.
You mean small indie films that cost only a couple $1,000s can't blow up a 747 into a giant hangar? That's not the norm for indie films these days?
No, you just got to know people who are willing to lend you a jet to explode.
Oh yeah, I know Tom Clancy. He just lent me his jet. Tom Clancy's dead, isn't he?
He's been dead for a while. And also, like, how would he have a freaking cargo jet?
I don't know. Didn't he have his own private island?
So do a lot of pedophiles. I mean, people.
Oh, was Tom Clancy confused? Did someone allege that Tom Clancy was a pedophile, or is this like
No, I think it's just it's
Jeffrey
more of a
Epstein.
private island joke than anything.
Gotcha. Private island / pedo island. God, the state of this world. So we're gonna forego with the normal "What have you been watching?" because we have two movies that I think we can get some dense conversation out of. Well, at least one movie we can. The other one I think we can.
The other reason we can forgo "What have you been watching?" is because I haven't watched anything other than the two movies that we're featuring on this podcast, so I have nothing to say.
All right, well that's good. I was trying to watch new stuff all week, so good. I'm glad. So let's just jump into Tenet, Christopher Nolan's newest time-bending thriller action movie extravaganza, starring John David Washington and co-starring Robert Pattinson et al., including Kenneth Branagh. So, what you just saw Tenet, correct?
Yes.
All right, and I saw it like a couple weeks ago. I was going to try and sneak out to the theater and see it again so that I would have more of a fresh impression of it for our discussion, but I wasn't able to because the movie is super fucking long. So, yeah. And theaters are, dangerous places to go. But on the Under the Wheels website, you already know my rating for it, so I'll start and then I'll ask you. My rating, I gave it a high witness. What do you give it?
I would give it just a witness.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I kept going back and forth between, like, is this movie good enough to be shiny and chrome, or is it just sort of like really good ideas,
No, definitely
really
not.
really good ideas, really good set pieces, but I felt like there was a lot of other failings. So, like, we can conclude that we're pretty big fans of Christopher Nolan in general, I would say.
Yeah, I would say I don't think he's made a bad movie, including Tenet, although Tenet is, it's pushing the line a little bit.
Tenet or Interstellar? Which is worse?
Tenet.
Ooh,
Tenet is
wow.
worse.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So you gave it a witness. Why do you feel like it's a witness?
Because it's got a lot of cool stuff in it to where it's worth a watch. All of the time-bending stuff, for the most part, works really well, and it's visually very interesting. There's a lot of neat, like, cinematic tricks and stuff that he uses, but on a number of levels, it is not only, like, bad, but sloppy in a way that's kind of surprising for Nolan.
Did you read my review before you saw it?
No.
Okay, interesting. We kind of came to... I have a feeling we came to a kind of a similar conclusion. I'm going to put a blanket spoilers right now because there's a lot that I want to talk about that I had not been able to talk about in the review. Things that I really liked, things that I felt were really badly done, and I kind of want to just get into it. So I'm going to put a spoilers because I don't want to feel restricted in any way. But most of it's just going to be kind of interrogating you for the first half, probably. So you said on multiple levels the movie was either didn't work or was sloppy for you. I can go into the reasons why it was for me, but I would rather hear what you have to say.
So there's a lot of shot-to-shot editing that's not good.
Yes.
For example, Kenneth Branagh and Elizabeth Debicki are married in this movie. Kenneth Branagh is this evil Russian arms dealer who communes with the future somehow and is trying to end the world. And then Elizabeth Debicki is his sad sack of a wife.
His sad, sexy lamp.
Who does a really good job, but
she is. She actually isn't a sexy lamp. She has a lot of agency in the movie and does a lot, but it's
but
it's easy to categorize it like
so. There's a scene where she tries to shoot him and can't kind of summon up the nerve to do it, and he gets really mad and like beats her up, and the way him beating her up is edited. You can't tell who's hitting who, when, or where. And he also, Kenneth Branagh, who's known for being just ridiculous and over the top, it delivers a very restrained performance throughout the entire movie, except for this scene where he gets, comically silly.
See, I had the opposite impression when I was watching it. I felt he was one of the more out there performances in this movie because he's Kenneth Branagh, and that's what he does.
No, I thought his performance was very subdued until that scene where he goes "Wah!" as he
and he's spitting on the camera and shit.
Kicks, as he throws kicks that you can't see. But yeah, the editing is weird because normally when you edit someone getting hit, you usually cut on the hit or you show them getting hit, so people are like, I see with my eyes that person got hit, and I feel bad for them. Mm-hmm. But instead, it starts him throwing a kick. Elizabeth Debicki's on the ground and he's kicking her in the stomach. So it starts with him throwing a kick, then it cuts to his face, then it cuts back down to after he's landed and he's retracting his leg.
Yes. Yeah.
Now you can see how that would be just visually nonsensical.
Right. I mean, all the action scenes are kind of like that, though. The action scenes get cooler as it goes, and there's one scene in the very beginning that doesn't have any sort of special effects that I was like, oh, this action scene is really jiving for me. But for the most part, all of the action scenes in the movie, especially the ending, just don't make any sense. The ending is a whole other. Yeah, we'll get into that.
We'll get to the ending in a bit, but
we'll get into that.
A lot of the action scenes work pretty well. It's just there's a lot of moment to moment things like that.
It's the entirety of the movie.
The editing just falls apart for 30 seconds, and you're just like, what the hell happened here?
So here's another example for me is in the beginning of the movie, it's a long movie, but normally in Christopher Nolan movies, it doesn't feel like the beginning after the big, intro scene. It doesn't feel like the beginning of the movie is trying to catch up to get you invested in the rest of the movie. Mm-hmm. In Tenet, it felt like that first 30 minutes of trying to get him to see Michael Caine and get him to see the that one girl who was Fleur in Harry Potter. Yeah. All of that felt super rushed and very hard to process.
It's
and
crazy
I was
because the movie's 2.5 hours long, but it almost moves too fast in some places.
Yeah.
To where especially it not so much that it doesn't make sense, but it's just that moments that should have gravity don't have gravity. Because you're just kind of running by them so quickly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they also have to disguise the fact that John David Washington's character does not have a name.
Or a personality.
He tried. There's scenes where he's trying.
Did he?
There's 3 or 4 scenes where he kind of has a smirk and he's like, I'm going to try and be charming guy. And then you're like, but then
every scene where his character has a personality is he's just reacting to an actual character with an actual personality. Whether it's Robert Pattinson or Elizabeth Debicki or Kenneth Branagh.
Quote, personality of Kenneth Branagh. Also, one last point, and then I'll get back to you. You're talking about the sloppiness. I feel like every decade, Kenneth Branagh somehow, winds up married or, having a weird sex scene with an actress in her 20s. He's like the Leonardo DiCaprio of on-screen personalities. Because, Elizabeth Debicki's, she's, late 20s, right? And
she's in her
Kenneth Branagh's
30s,
like pushing
but-
60s. So,
Well, let's
yeah.
let's find out. She's 30.
Is she? Oh, I thought she was a little bit younger.
And then
Oh,
Kenneth Branagh is 59.
Love that Kenneth Branagh. Anyway, so I agree with you definitely that the editing moment to moment is, generally speaking, pretty atrocious. Again, new editor for Christopher Nolan, so maybe that's why, but I was never a fan of Lee Smith's editing on his movies either. Also,
I know you don't like Lee Smith because he cuts everything to death, but I think that for the way Nolan's movies normally are, you have to cut them to death.
Yeah, he doesn't develop, and this is going to get into a point that I take issue with Nolan's films, is like things don't develop in camera. Like everything is developed and preceded in the movie by editing, which I think is a deficiency of Nolan as a filmmaker.
I don't necessarily. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a deficiency. It's just his style. It's a habit.
Maybe, but it gets in the way for me of like everyone's like, oh, and is the amazing and luscious camera work, and I'm like, well, not if you're just editing two things. Like if things develop in your luscious camera work, then you've transcended. But if not, then you're not that different than like Michael Bay, in some respects.
Sort of.
In some respects, I know it's controversial. It's a controversial opinion.
Like everyone's got a style, and everyone has tools that they favor more than others, right? And I think for Nolan, his style has always rested on editing, almost to the exclusion of everything else. His shtick is so editing heavy. Camera work is obviously becoming a bigger part of his repertoire, as you can see with even in Tenet, like a lot of the action sequences are way more dynamic, and they develop things in camera a lot more than they would in, say, Batman Begins,
right,
or The Dark Knight. But yeah, his style is so editing heavy that you have to edit a lot to keep things moving, because otherwise, it's just singles of people talking, and you don't want to hold on any one of those for too long.
Right.
I think a guy who uses who cuts dialogue scenes to death but does it really well is David Fincher.
Yeah.
Because he will shoot mostly singles, but he'll do it from a bajillion different angles and do a bajillion takes, and then each single shot will be slightly different than the ones before it, even if it's featuring the same character in the same place, based on kind of what's being said and what the subtext of the scene is. Mm-hmm. But those rely a ton on editing and camera placement, but not really camera work.
Right, but even then, there's internal blocking in the scenes that can develop. Like there's people who have to like stand up, or there's people turning here and there, redirecting it. And the placement of the characters is important, as opposed to like in this, there's a lot of, people are going to have a dialogue scene. They're just going to stand in place and have the dialogue scene, or they're going to go to a table and have a dialogue scene and things like that, dialogue wise, which is, again, it's more of a deficiency of American cinema that's just become the standard. It's probably has more to do with like the...
Although I do like all the walk and talks.
In this movie?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember any of them. I mean,
one thing that's neat about Tenet, one thing I do like about it, is that it's structured like a set of... If you think about our John David Washington's protagonist and...
The protagonist. Who is the protagonist of this story, even though he is told he is not the protagonist of this story. Only to come around and declare himself the protagonist of this story.
And his pal, Bobby Pattinson.
Yep.
They're almost a set of like bank robbers or criminals. And throughout the movie, they have to perform a series of heists to advance the plot. Mm-hmm. And they perform 2 heists going forward in time, and then 2 heists going backward in time. So the movie loops around. And before each heist, except the last one, there's like a briefing kind of where they formulate a plan. And the way they formulate a plan is they do a walk and talk in public and loudly discuss what they're going to do on the streets of a major city. And I thought that was really cool. Like, I thought that's a really cool structural thing. It's a cool visual thing. The fact that it doesn't make sense is funny. And it's a neat way to design your movie, to have okay, we have a problem. And then, Robert Pattinson's like, okay, so we got to do a heist. And then they design this heist and they pull it off. And they're like, okay, we've run that, there is a twist. Something we didn't expect has caused things to go wrong for us. What do we do? Well, now we have to do this other heist. Let's talk about it in this, walking through the streets and on a bus, a really crowded bus for some reason. And figure out how we're going to do this next heist, and then this next one, and it's like, I don't know. I like that. I like the feel of it. I like that style. But
yeah, I mean, that's true. Like, you see every single dollar on that screen, like all 200 million. It's like, okay, if it's not in visual effects work, which I'm sure they had a little bit of touching up here and there, then it's like, okay, it's in the set pieces, and even it's a good point in the moment to moment, just in like a dialogue scene. You'll have a bunch of extras running around and like, oh, that shit's not cheap.
Yeah,
so we gotta make our days. No,
I think the one scene that really boggled my mind is also, I will say, the way that those walk and talks are edited is kind of like the way that all of the expository dialogue in The Limey is edited. It's like a lighter version of that, where it's not as disorienting, which I liked as well. Yeah,
explain, because I don't remember those walk and talk scenes at all. Like,
it's very impressionistic. John David Washington and Robert Pattinson are discussing what they need to do to pull off the next robbery, essentially. And they continue a single conversation, but where they're standing, where they're going, is constantly changing. Like, they could be walking down a street, then they could be in a bus, then they could be in a cafe. The conversation proceeds linearly, but the visuals are non-linear. Same way that a lot of exposition is done in The Limey, which I think is cool.
Gotcha. So it's the fact that like each section of the plan takes place in a different place is kind of what you're talking about. Because I remember, didn't they do one time where it was like cross-cutting between the real, like what they were doing and what they were talking about, like in the
as well. Yeah, they do that too. So if there's like setup. If there's, major setup or they have to scout a location or something, that also gets cut in as well. So when Robert Pattinson is scouting the offshore warehouse or whatever, to to kind of gauge its security systems, that his little trip to check out the place is cut in with their dialogue as well. So I thought that was all very good and very well done. Very good editing.
Yeah.
I just thought it was funny. I want to say there's the second job where they have to steal the plutonium. They discuss how they're going to steal plutonium on a crowded bus, which I thought that was funny, but
which of course, like, spoilers. They're not. No, I want to get into that later. I want to go back to the sloppy, because I thought. In my review, I said that I thought the moment-to-moment editing was sloppy, and I also thought that the overall editing was sloppy. Specifically in the first half of the movie, like, getting things going felt like it took forever. Even though I like the scene with Michael Caine, who does not, like, he looks like he's starting to circle the drain a little bit. But I thought it was funny how he was like, get out of that Brooks Brothers crap, and hands him a credit card with basically unlimited funds. It's like, oh, this is the James Bondy part of it.
He's literally just there as like a totem for Christopher Nolan at this point.
It's his good luck charm.
He's gonna
have a mannequin of Michael Caine in one frame of every single one of his movies, like Alfred Hitchcock put himself in there. It's like you're always going to see some sort of Michael Caine-y type thing in all of Christopher Nolan's films, even after Caine is dead.
And he's those people who are really into crystals. Like, Michael Caine is Christopher Nolan's crystal. I think the other thing that really stuck out to me as being just crap was, the movie tries to strike a balance between two conflicting tones. One is, kind of this surreal, serious, mind-bending thriller, heist, spy movie type of thing. and the other is like the cool, quippy James Bond spy movie type of thing. And they don't go together at all. There will be a scene happening, and then there's a spy movie style twist that goes on, and John David Washington makes some sort of quip that's meant to be cool. And you just go, what the fuck, man? None of this works. It's all happening too fast. It's all poorly executed. We can get into that later because a lot of that deals with spoilers, but...
No, we can get into it now.
Okay. So I want to say right off the bat, I thought the acting in this movie was really good, except I thought John David Washington was boring, and then that Indian lady is awful. Every word she says just rings completely false. It's just garbage.
I
it doesn't
thought John
help.
David Washington did the best with what he had.
It doesn't help that she's kind of like his M to an extent, so there's a lot of back and forth between them. So, like, there's a scene setting up the final act where they talk to each other, and she's talking about how this time travel crap got started and where Tenet is from, and she's terrible at delivering her lines. The whole scene is edited weirdly. John David Washington seems to be reacting to a scene that he thinks is happening but isn't actually happening. Like, his reactions are like, oh, wow, this scene is way better than it actually is. It's not. And all of the twists just land flat. Like when she said, yes, and Tenet was created in the future. I'm just sitting there like, whatever, I don't care at this point. If you say anything, I automatically don't care about it. And then there's the very, very end of the movie where, God, I'm wondering how to set this up for people who haven't seen Tenet.
You know what, the people who haven't seen Tenet, like, I feel like at this point, if they were going to see it in theaters, they would. And we've already done a couple blanket spoilers on here, and I do really want to talk about some of the rules of the world and everything.
The very last scene of the movie.
Well, hold on. Matt, future Matt, put a timestamp so that people can zip ahead to the point when we stop talking about spoilers here.
Dude, you're pulling a Tenet right now.
I know. I'm actually gonna say it in reverse so that I can play it forward, and then it'll sound all weird and wonky,
like what David Lynch always does.
Yes, exactly.
Like that's his most famous trick, is having people say stuff backwards, but then playing it forwards so that like what they say makes sense, but it sounds weird.
All right, guys, I'm not gonna lie. I intended to record this backwards. I even wrote it out, but I was dumb and I didn't write it out reverse phonetically. And so instead of getting a cool sounding David Lynchian / Ludwig Göransson reversal sound thing, it just sounded like shit. So yeah, future Matt failed past Matt. But if you do want to avoid spoilers, please go to time code 1:26:43, 1 hour, 26 minutes, 43 seconds. Not accounting for this. So now I'm going to have to get into another turnstile to go back and... Never mind. Just continue on with the episode or skip ahead past the hour 43 second mark to avoid spoilers.
So, okay, the very last scene of the movie, Elizabeth Debicki's character is about to be assassinated by the Indian lady because she knows too much, and the Indian lady has to tie up loose ends. So at this point in the movie, John David Washington has basically become God or something like that, who can just time travel and teleport at will. And he appears in the back of the Indian lady's car as she's about to shoot Elizabeth Debicki. And it's supposed to be a scene where, like, our hero has finally turned into like the ultimate badass and is able to one-up the person who is constantly one-upping him.
Right.
And the audience is supposed to think, wow, he's so cool now that he has all these like crazy time travel powers. Instead, what you get is just a muddled mess of a scene because it's all edited to where, again, moment to moment, everything's rushed through. So you're kind of like, what? The Indian lady's performance is terrible. John David Washington's performance isn't that good. A lot of what they say doesn't make sense. I don't know how time travel has to do with teleportation and how he's just able to appear in her car. But, he delivers a bunch of, final plot twists about how he's really been in control all along and everyone, including himself, was secretly working for him in the future, which is also the thing from Interstellar, which is weird, but anyway. And then he shoots the Indian lady, saves Elizabeth Debicki, and the movie ends. And
the dialogue was very End of Dark Knight-y.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting there thinking, like, wow, that's one of those scenes that, like, you remember in Casino Royale when Mr. White is walking on the beach and he gets shot and James Bond shows up and he's like, what's up, bitch? And you're like, ha! Bond got him! And then it rolls to credits and you're like, wow, that was such a great ending. Mm-hmm. This was like the most botched version of that I can possibly imagine.
So I will say this. I think a lot of people had a lot of questions about the time traveling and a lot of confusion about that, because I think even Austin was saying like he was kind of confused by it, and a lot of the reviewers were like, I don't know the logic of how all of it works, to which I say, like, no one really ever knows all the logic of Christopher Nolan's movies.
Well, it's also time travel is inherently illogical, but...
Right. I mean, I figure, like, in all of the movies that actually have time travel, this is one of the more interesting takes on it, in a very Metal Gear Solid-y way of, the entropy is reversed in your body. I was like, it's very Metal Gear Solid.
I was half expecting Hideo Kojima to come out and start, like, explaining stuff.
I know, it's like Christopher Nolan's trying to put his hat in for the Metal Gear Solid movie, but only if he can do time travel with it.
This really is just a kind of whatever Metal Gear Solid movie.
That's how I felt watching it, but specifically in that scene, like, I feel like they, in my mind, and maybe just because I kind of like went along with it and just kind of like bought it to whatever means I needed it, like most Christopher Nolan movies. Oh yeah, that makes logical sense. Oh, I guess this doesn't, but I've gone along with it so far. I'll keep going. I know that she had the phone to call him, and then like he was able to like finagle his way into the car. I figured like he was already in the car the whole time, and like, cackling behind the seat like an evil bad guy, like I'm gonna get her this time. But there's also a lot of times in Christopher Nolan movies where he forgoes real world logic in his scene for dramatic.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing. Like, it doesn't have to totally logically make sense, because it's kind of like the end of the first Matrix, where Neo, picks up a payphone and like delivers a monologue, and then the camera zooms out to like a bird's eye view of the city, and he flies past it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to think to yourself, how is Neo flying? You're just supposed to think, oh shit, he's flying.
Well, and it has a logical progression as well. And I understand what you're saying about how this doesn't, it's like she's in the car, she's talking to her goon, and all of a sudden her goon transforms into John David Washington, and he says some sort of philosophical, techno babble about like, ooh, I am actually, like, I am Tenet. Tenet is me, and like shoots her in the head, and she's like,
I told you, you had to start thinking in a new way.
Yeah, like, oh, okay. I guess so.
But yeah, it's one of those scenes
back.
where basically, well, it's also like, it's the scene at the end of like a superhero movie where, our hero has worked to like learn the rules of the world and obtain new powers. And then it's kind of like a little coda where the hero has taken this huge leap off screen that we haven't seen, and we're seeing like the fullest extent of what he can do.
Right.
And we're just supposed to be kind of like awed by it and not think too hard about how it happens.
I mean, the ending of this movie is just a fucking mess anyway.
Oh yeah.
Like, even without that scene where he's trying to like wrap up everything in a bow tie, because like there's so many questions I had in the fact of like, I can make the logical jump, but also editing caused problems.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, the whole point I'm trying to make is like, the very last scene of the movie where he saves Elizabeth Debicki's character is a very standard scene in this type of movie.
Yeah.
But it is executed horribly to the point where nothing works. Like, I'm not talking about whether or not it makes sense, because everyone knows that this movie is a little
I'm sorry.
confusing.
Yeah, I know what I get what you're saying.
I'm saying that, like, on an emotional level and on a kind of, like, cool factor level, it doesn't work. It doesn't deliver any of the things that it's supposed to deliver, regardless of whether or not it makes sense.
Right.
If you think too hard about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, that's kind of a microcosm of this movie, though, right? It's like, man, it's all of this money, all of these great things, but like, it just doesn't. It almost works, but it doesn't quite work.
Not quite. It's sort of because it's like it's a lot of the things within the movie, similar to Inception, are set up pretty well and make sense if you pay attention. It's just once it starts pushing out towards the edges a little bit, you start thinking too much, and then you're like, wait, huh?
Yeah.
So for example, like, the basic plot of the movie makes sense. There's someone in the future has invented a way to cause objects to move backward in time.
Mm-hmm.
And they realize that this is a huge mistake, so they break up this essentially super weapon into 9 pieces and send the 9 pieces back in time to the past. Far enough that if they go, really far back, no one will know what they are or how to use them. It's like, okay, it's fine. So our heroes have to stop a future apocalypse that's being caused by sending weapons into the past. Okay. But then you introduce the bad guy, Kenneth Branagh, as this Russian arms dealer who communes with the future somehow and is able to turn, who's also able to invert objects the way the future people do. And you're like, okay, that's an interesting mystery. How does he do that? Well, he has these turnstiles which allow him to reverse time. It's like, okay, where did the turnstiles come from? I don't know. Were they sent back in time? I don't know. Does that mean the turnstiles are inverted? I don't know. Who is he talking to in the future? I don't know. Is he talking to himself in the future? I don't know. He has pancreatic cancer, so he's not going to live very long. Is he talking to himself, or is he talking to someone thousands of years from now? I don't know. Why do people thousands of years from now have this interest in rebuilding this super weapon that can turn back time? And if they do, why are they going through Kenneth Branagh's character, who just sort of happened upon it by chance and is really in this for himself, not for some larger thing? I don't know. How far in the future was Tenet created? I don't know. Tenet could only be about 40 years in the future, considering that John David Washington is like 35. Unless he's somehow used his time travel powers to make himself immortal. I don't know. The fact that if you travel back in time, or if you invert yourself, you're moving backwards through time, which means there are now 2 of you, one moving forward, one moving backward. If you go far enough into the past and turn yourself forward again, that means there are 2 of you now going forward in time. Why hasn't anyone in the movie used this to create unlimited copies of themselves to just run around and do crazy shit like Bender does in that one Futurama episode? I don't know.
Well, I think you can only go back in time, but from turnstile to turnstile. So I think that's like you're moving in a negative direction of time only lasts until you get to another turnstile.
That's what. But what I'm saying is like.
But you're right, because I'm looking back at the movie and I'm like, yeah, but then there's that one time that they're on a boat that's clearly being rewound on VHS tape, and they're there, but there's also another.
There's multiple instances of people seeing copies of themselves, right?
Yeah.
Elizabeth Debicki sees a copy of herself jump off
of the boat.
John David Washington fights a copy of himself moving backwards in time at the same time. Robert Pattinson is fighting a copy of John David Washington moving forward in time. So there's 3 John David Washingtons in that scene.
Right, which then turns to just 2. Because the one going backwards in time gets through the turnstile.
Yes. But...
Yeah, for months later, like weeks later in the turnstile.
But yeah, actually, there's 3 of them in one scene. So it's like, why hasn't anyone used this to make a bunch of versions of themselves? Like, it's almost implied that Kenneth Branagh does that as well, because there's that interrogation scene in the Turnstile where he's inverted, asking questions, de-inverts himself, and then reinverts himself to listen back.
God.
Which is like,
I need a degree in math and physics again. Just like it's going back to why couldn't
you
they
don't
have
need
a
a degree in
simple thing
math.
like-
You need like a notepad and a pen to work this out, which is not good.
I don't know. Like at a certain point, it's like, wait, okay, but plus 18 hours minus 56 years plus 17 hours. Well, and yeah, I mean, and again, all of this stuff with the inversion, which is like the big gimmick of the movie, all looks really cool and is really cool to me.
Yeah.
But it must have been a fucking pain in the ass to shoot. But
I'm sure. I mean, like the scene where John David
Yeah,
Washington fights himself moving back in time
while he's moving forward.
While he's moving forward is awesome.
Yes.
It's really cool. But it's like, how much, chaos in the mind of the audience are you willing to create to have a cool moment like that?
Yeah. And
Or
again, like it's cut to the point where like you can tell when the guys were like, okay, I got to jump. I have to pretend like I'm jumping backwards while he's moving forward. So like it's also edited in a way where it's like, okay, I can get the bare minimum of what's going on, which I would say is in contrast to the end of the movie where some of the stuff that happens, I was like, what the fuck is going on?
Okay.
But
Well,
we don't have to get into that just yet.
No, let's do it. Let's talk about the climax of the movie. So
Okay, the climax of the movie is Aaron Taylor Johnson is really fun to watch when he's a supporting character.
Is he though?
Yeah, I liked him in this.
I don't like him ever.
Really?
I
You
didn't even
like
know
him
it.
in,
I didn't even
The
know
Outlaw
it was
King?
him, and I didn't like him.
Oh, see, I hated him in most of the things where he's like the main character, but when he's a supporting character and he's like putting on a different accent or acting crazy or this
Well,
or
he's
that,
English,
I generally like
so
him.
this is his normal accent, probably.
No, I think he got like a Cockney accent for this, but like in Outlaw King where he adopts a Scottish accent and he's like running around killing people with his bare hands and stuff. I was like, yeah, all right, okay, maybe I'm on the train. I liked him in this though.
I didn't. I thought this I'm like, whoever this guy is, he's annoying. And then I look at the credits and it's Aaron Taylor Johnson.
And
I'm
you're just like,
oh,
yeah,
that
of
makes
course.
sense. That makes sense.
Oh.
All right. So the
let's get into
the
the
climax of the movie is.
So there's two teams. One team is going forward in time.
Well,
The
hold
other
on,
team
hold
is
on.
going- Okay.
We need to preface this. So
You're right. You're right.
our heroes have to pull off one last heist in a Soviet closed city that is about to blow up. And when it blows up, all of the pieces of this super weapon will be put together,
Algorithm.
which is linked to a kill switch in Kenneth Branagh's pacemaker. Kenneth Branagh will commit suicide, causing the end of the world.
Correct.
So our heroes assemble a huge team of soldiers that just sort of come out of nowhere, but are presumably part of Tenet or something.
They'd been hinted at beforehand a couple of times when
Yeah,
like
but
as they slowly
badly.
explain. Well, yeah, I mean, because the Aaron Taylor Johnson character was there like basically from like the middle of the movie onward after they reveal that like Robert Pattinson is actually like from the past / future, and he's been part of Tenet the whole time.
He's from the days of futures past.
He is Kitty Pryde / Wolverine, depending on which one you prefer to go with. I'm going to go with Kitty Pryde in this case.
But anyway, so there's
Yes.
Tenet's little private army is gathered outside of the Soviet town.
Yeah.
Aaron Taylor Johnson delivers a briefing similar to the walk and talks, but way more boring. Where
he's writing all over the freaking screen and making it even more confusing.
Exactly. His briefing makes no sense whatsoever. He does a horrible job, and it's not him personally, it's the writing. His character does not explain anything very well, and their entire plan and the purpose of this mission is not explained coherently. So basically they're out here doing a thing for reasons we don't totally understand. Or we understand the reasons, but we don't understand how it's going to happen.
Well, there's two teams. One team is going forward, one team's going backwards.
Yes,
which is
that's
their
all we
excuse to
know.
make two
That's all we know.
watches. And that's the only thing I cared about, was the fact that they had these cool watches, but they both counted forward in time, which I was like, well, what's the point of having these two super expensive cool watches?
Anyway,
we know that there's two, and we know that one team has to like dismantle the bomb, and the other team is basically committing suicide.
But even you sound skeptical about it.
Oh yeah,
like,
well,
like,
yeah,
what?
2 weeks
Maybe?
out. Yeah.
I don't know. So
2 weeks out. Yeah.
Here's what we know for
That's
sure.
why I wanted to watch it again.
Let me
go ahead.
So here's what we know for sure. There's a bomb in this city. Our Tenet army is split into two teams, one moving forward in time, one moving backward in time. And they have to do something, the bomb. That's not really explained very well. They also go through this really complicated plan of how they're going to get to the bomb, which is also not explained very well. The map that Aaron Taylor Johnson uses does not show anything, and therefore does a poor job of laying out the geography of the city. So we're going in to the big climactic action sequence.
With the editing,
So we're going into the big climactic action sequence knowing one thing. There's two teams, one moving forward, one moving backward, and they have to get the bomb. That's it. We don't know anything else because it was all explained so horribly. Now we get into the scene itself. This Russian city has no identifiable landmarks. It is all just brown sand and like abandoned buildings. And there's a battle going on, right? There's enemy troops here. We don't know who they are because that's never explained. We don't know what they're doing because that's never explained. We just assume at a certain point they're with Kenneth Branagh, but that's never said explicitly. So they're just sort of there. There's a battle going on for some reason. The way it's shot and edited is like Saving Private Ryan style, where the geography of the battlefield is nonsensical because it's trying to capture the visceral excitement of the action. And what that does is it makes sure you don't know where anyone is at any time.
Right.
Then on top of that, everyone is dressed identically. So you can't tell who's John David Washington, who is Aaron Taylor Johnson, who's Robert Pattinson. Everyone looks the same. You can't tell where anyone is in relation to each other. Even the bad guys are dressed kind of the same as the good guys. So you don't know who anyone is, you don't know where anyone is, you don't know what the plan is, you don't know how the plan is being executed, you don't know what stage they are in the plan, you don't know what the geography looks like, you don't know what's happening. It's just a bunch of chaos on the screen with time travel also thrown in to make things extra confusing.
I was just going to say, on top of that, half the scenes go in reverse, the other half go forward, but it's very hard to tell because every time anyone steps on the floor, the sand brushes up the same way. Even though if they're going in reverse, the sand should go back into their shoes.
So yeah, that's the other thing too.
It's all very confusing. Yeah.
There are scenes moving forward in time. There are scenes that are inverted. You can't tell which are inverted and which aren't. Also, you can't, because the way you would normally signify that, because a chaotic battle scene is sometimes going to be hard to invert using just special effects, is, you know, we know Robert Pattinson's going back in time while John David Washington is going forward in time. If we could see their faces, we know which direction the scene is going, but we can't see their faces, so we don't know.
Or if they gave them any sort of like identifiable landmark or anything like that,
or
aside from a blue watch that it cuts to, like a blue or a red watch that it cuts to tell you.
A blue or a red stripe that's really tiny on their shoulder.
Yeah, little trinket on someone's backpack.
Yeah. So, okay, it's like all of these things are uncertain in an action sequence.
Right.
Which, you know, would give anyone just an aneurysm. So then, to add an extra layer of confusion, I guess, is you have all this going on. Just, it's a horribly executed action scene that doesn't make any sense, and you can't follow what's happening. You just know that one of these gray soldier guys needs to get the bomb, and everything else is just noise. So
the algorithm. Yeah.
So then, while all this is going on, John David Washington, two nondescript soldiers who just happen to be our main character and Aaron Taylor Johnson, get into the bunker.
Two stuntmen.
Two stuntmen who happen to be our heroes, get into the bunker and they find the bomb. And then there's a series of spy thriller style plot twists that happen. Which is bad, because you already have an action sequence that is so poorly put together it makes absolutely no sense. It's this big chaotic battle with no discernible story, no discernible momentum, no discernible characters or geography. And then you try to throw in like plot twists on top of that, where like there's double crosses and more time travel and like inverted dead guys coming back to life to save our heroes.
Also, don't forget this is intercut with Elizabeth Debicki trying to wait to kill Kenneth Branagh at just the right moment.
Well, but that part actually makes sense. So
yeah, that it does.
Stay.
But that's thrown into us trying to follow this really big, loud action scene.
Yeah.
So anytime we might be oriented as to what's going on, it would cut back, and then you get another tense moment between two pretty good actors.
Yeah.
And then cuts back to John David Washington running into a wall in a video game.
Yeah, and then there's like a long sequence where John David Washington is stuck on the other side of a fence while the evil like giant Russian henchman is prepping the bomb. And he gets a phone call from the main bad guy, and they talk about the themes of the movie. And I couldn't help but think to myself, like,
I forgot. Yes, that's right.
Like, this is a weird place to talk about the themes of the movie. You're at the moment of maximum confusion, maximum tension. Everyone's lost at this point, but also kind of intrigued. And you just have this phone call where, John David Washington is accusing Kenneth Branagh of being a nihilist, which is like, why are we talking philosophy right now? And then Kenneth Branagh is like, environmentalism stuff. I have to turn back time so we can answer for the sins of the present to the past. And you're like, what? Why are they... everything leading up to this has made absolutely no sense. Has been so botched. It's like one of the worst battle scenes I've ever seen. And now you're just grinding it all to a halt to talk about, like, who's gonna pay for the sins of our contemporary moment? Like...
I did not expect this. This has become my favorite segment of this episode so far. It's just you trying to figure out and make sense of this ending. I thought I was going to be the one who was going to be bashing it, but now I have to take the awkward stance of eventually trying to defend any of the choices. So this should be, oh God, go on.
And then, like a freaking Deus Ex Machina, the dead soldier who happens to be inverted comes back to life to eat a headshot from the evil Russian dude. So then John David Washington can break the gate open, do a horribly, like, just a weirdly awkward grappling sequence that's blocked and edited and photographed very poorly to disable the Russian dude, get the bomb, get extracted at the last second by Robert Pattinson in a sequence that, again, like... I'm not even talking about, it's confusing because time travel. I'm talking about, it's confusing because the camera isn't pointed at something that you can see, and it's cut too quickly to something else that you also can't see. Yep. Robert Pattinson saves them, and then they have like their, weird Casablanca, this is the end of a beautiful friendship, goodbye. And... it's implied that Robert Pattinson was the inverted dead soldier who came back to save John David Washington.
They have cut to his little trinket. Yeah. Weird
and unnecessary. And then you're just kind of left there sitting and thinking to yourself, wow, that was some of the worst 20 minutes of filmmaking I've ever seen. Like, that's extraordinarily bad, and it's a shame that it's in this movie. It's like Interstellar, except Interstellar is amazing up until it turns into shit, whereas Tenet is like pretty good until it turns to shit.
Well, plus Tenet doesn't have Matt Damon, normal Matt Damon episode. Yes! I was gonna fit him in somehow.
Matt Damon.
Yes, this would have benefited from some Matt Damon randomness, but anyway.
Well, it's interesting to compare this to Interstellar because Interstellar is a great movie until Matthew McConaughey goes into the black hole, and then everything after sucks. And that kind of net lowers the quality of the movie. Tenet is a very good movie that sucks after Aaron Taylor Johnson starts briefing you on the final mission. It just goes completely off the rails. Again, not because Christopher Nolan's time travel crap is confusing. It's actually not that confusing. It's just the filmmaking stinks in that last chunk, and
Which is
it's a shame. So then net, it drags down the quality of the movie as a whole. You go from a fun, exciting spy thriller to this is just empty noise, gunfire, and explosions. And it's incredibly frustrating. And then it's like all of the ways they try to tie it up afterwards, because you're in such a haze of like, what the fuck, don't work. Like, the whole goodbye with Robert Pattinson is supposed to be like fun and poignant and funny all at the same time. None of it lands. All you think to yourself is like, damn, I wish Bobby was in a better movie.
See, I thought at that moment I was like, he's like, all right, well, I guess I got to go back in time. And he's like, no, you'll die. But, you know, not really that explicit, but basically he's like, you're going to die if you go back. And he's like, well, them's the breaks, kid. We had a great friendship. He's like, what do you mean? I've only known you for 2 weeks. And he's like, no, you've known me since I was born. And it's supposed to be like this amazing moment and this epic moment. And I was like, is that supposed to imply that Robert Pattinson is Elizabeth Debicki's son? Or like he recruited him? Like, in a movie that's all about like convergent points, that was just a very strange, like, it left me wondering. And even like you were like, oh yeah, he took a bullet to the head in reverse, and I was like, is that how he died? I just remember, like, when I look back to that scene, I just remember a lot of shaky camera, a lot of John David Washington yelling, a lot of Kenneth Branagh Russian accent mumbling, and then like cut to the trinket thing that was at the beginning of the movie and then comes back at the end of the movie. And I was like, so he dies there clearly, but like,
well, exactly.
What?
It's supposed to be like this mind-blowing plot twist that, like,
but it's
whoa,
incredibly confusing because the editing is horrible, the camera work is atrocious. Like,
well,
I'm sorry,
it's like,
you know where I stand on Hoyt van Hoytema. So, or Hoyt
I
van
don't
Hoytema.
know where you stand on Hoyt van Hoytema.
I miss Wally Pfister.
Oh,
that's where I
like
stand.
Hoyt van Hoytema. I like him a lot, actually.
I thought his work on Interstellar was really good. I thought his work on Dunkirk was really sloppy, and I felt like his camera work here was even sloppier. And
I really like what he did in Ad Astra, though.
That's true. There's never been a time though that I was like, oh yeah, I'm a fan of Hoyt van Hoytema. Like, in general, I feel like Nolan's quality has gone down in as far as like, and it might have just been a natural regression. Like, if you look at The Dark Knight Rises, that's kind of sloppy, but I feel like Nolan has gotten sloppier in the basic filmmaking mechanics in favor of putting together these really exciting, really interesting, and really like complex set pieces.
I disagree because I think Dunkirk is a masterpiece, both like technically and otherwise.
I think the editing in Dunkirk is. I think the camera work in Dunkirk is. I don't think it's the best because, and again, like, a lot of it gets down to like, it's really like the color timing is really weird in the movie. The jumps between 70 millimeter and like what they shot on IMAX, the framing of some of those shots are very strange. So that's like, I think Dunkirk is amazing, and I've gone back and I've rewatched it, and I really like it. But I don't think that Hoyt van Hoytema, in my mind, really brings that much more to a movie than like a really great cinematographer does.
Maybe.
That's my piece on Hoyt van Hoytema.
I guess the point I was trying to make a second ago was, you know, when Robert Pattinson reveals that he was recruited as a part of Tenet a long time ago by John David Washington's future self, and that John David Washington is actually the man behind Tenet, it's supposed to be this crazy plot twist where you're like, whoa, that's crazy. He was really working for himself the whole time. But it falls completely flat because after that completely idiotic climax, the audience's brain is just pudding. So like this cool twist doesn't even register. You know, you're just like, oh, whatever. I don't care anymore. And it's also weird too, because like the same thing happens in Interstellar, where it's implied that like the time library, where fifth dimensional beings built a time library so Matthew McConaughey can play with his daughter's watch. It's implied that the fifth dimensional beings were Matthew McConaughey as well.
Or his descendants. He somehow found a way to see time non-linearly. Do you have any more notes on that? I didn't want to cut you off again.
No, because then after that, it just goes to the assassination in the car that is also just trash. And I'm sorry, but like that Dimple Kapadia, who plays Priya in this movie, does a really bad job. Every scene she's in, I just kept rolling my eyes.
Hey man, you have to get that emerging India box office.
I guess, but it's like, at least get a good actor.
Since we're jumping around, I really hated the beginning of this movie. The opening scene is where I started getting worried that this movie was in trouble. That big, long opening scene where they have to like find this guy, bring him into a car and drive away. Because it just feels, it is connected to the rest of the movie, but it feels so disconnected. It's so loud, it's so long, and to me personally, it was so boring. And the way that it ends with like them like pulling the hood off of John David Washington, and all of a sudden you just see the words Tenet like superimposed over his face. I was like, oh no, what have I gotten myself into?
I didn't mind it too much. Like I hated
it.
I thought all of the exposition stuff after that was not so good, but I found the action sequence and everything around it to be fine. I just thought later at the end, why did future John David Washington want to pull out his own teeth?
because what is it that Robert Pattinson keeps saying? Like what is about to happen has already happened? Is that
what's happened has happened or something like that?
Yeah,
like you can't change the past.
Yeah, and which
old sport.
I mean, God, it gets into like predestination and like all of these like.
Well, and there's that whole scene where John David Washington learns finally that Robert Pattinson has been part of Tenet for a very, very long time, and he starts like asking him all these questions about how the time travel works. Right. And Robert Pattinson gives him a bunch of kind of just non-answers.
Mm-hmm. But like we're basically supposed to assume that everything they're doing has already happened, and so him going in reverse has already happened because clearly it has, since it happened at the very beginning of the movie, and et cetera, et cetera. I just like. There's that, like, why would he want himself to get captured? Like you said, get rid of his teeth, except to, like, get free better teeth in, like, the most brutal way possible, I guess. I don't know. I just, like, for being a Christopher Nolan film, I know he wants to start the audience off before he does the exposition dump, but all of the stuff with Clemence Posey, who is Fleur in Harry Potter, just for clarification, where she's like explaining the entropy and how it flows through the bullet. All that stuff I thought was handled really well, and like the bullet returning back to the gun and things like that.
That bit was good.
I thought
the
that
bit
was
in
interesting.
India where they have to sneak into the tower is not.
Yeah, let's slingshot our way up to the tower. I was like, wait a second, how far past like the realm of realism are we going here? We're gonna have him slingshot and then awkwardly jump. I agree with you. I really was like even more worried in that scene because I was like, this is edited really fast. A lot of this isn't making sense. There's no room for breathing. Everything is really loud. What the fuck am I watching? Oh my God, Christopher Nolan, are you making a train wreck? And
wait, so like, okay.
Yeah.
No, go on.
No. I was just gonna say like, and that's when I got worried. But then shortly after, when they started explaining the rules of the world, I was I started to like relax a little bit, and then relax a little bit more and more and more as the movie went, until the end.
Did you have sound issues? I've heard that a lot when people talk about the movie, that they couldn't hear.
So my experience, I saw it in IMAX, and when I watch a movie, I will sometimes make connections without needing to hear every single line of dialogue or, things like that. So if there is sound issues, like for example, every time anyone was wearing a mask, which happens a lot, the dialogue was always really muffled. On top of that, we haven't gotten into the score yet, which I want to talk about, but on top of that, there was a lot of bass in the IMAX theater, like to the point that when we left, it was almost like we were in a concert hall, like listening to like AC/DC for an hour and a half. And everyone's hearing was like kind of muted. So it was really loud, and I don't think the movie was balanced particularly well. And I think that because a lot of the dialogue happens with people wearing masks, that caused an issue of like muffled dialogue. But I was able to pick up most of the context clues.
Okay.
Did you have any issues with sound?
Sort of, but they're more my own fault. So,
Oh, God.
so I saw this movie at a drive-in theater.
Oh, are those the only ones open in Los Angeles right now?
No, there's other theaters open, but I've always wanted since I was a little kid to go to a drive-in movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured now I have the perfect excuse. So I had heard that the bass was overriding a lot of sound for people. So the way that this drive-in theater worked was like you tune into a radio station in your car, and the sound of the movie plays through your speakers. So what I did was I turned my car so the back was facing the screen. I put a couple lawn chairs out in front of the trunk. I popped the trunk because I have a hatchback. I turned the bass way down on the mix, turned the volume all the way up, and pushed the balance of the sound all the way to the back of the car. So I was actually able to hear everything really well. The only thing was, after about 25 minutes, my car automatically shuts off. So the only audio issues I had was when my car shut off, I'd have to run back in, start it again, close the door, and then run back out. So yeah, I could hear most of what they were saying pretty well once I calibrated it correctly. I missed a good chunk of exposition at the beginning with
Guy who died from insomnia. I don't
know.
No,
the French scientist.
Clemence Posey?
Yeah.
Oh,
I missed a good chunk of what she was saying, but that was about it.
Okay. She's basically Colonel from Metal Gear Solid explaining shit. Or I guess she's more like Otacon.
Otacon, yeah.
Yeah. Or Naomi.
Snake, this bullet has inverted entropy.
We've taken the time. What does that mean? Time runs backwards. Look. Wait, but doesn't that mean the bullet will always drop? No, you must perform the action, but by you performing the action, it reverses the action and therefore makes it come true. What do I need to do, Colonel? Press the B button to initiate the action. Since we're talking about sound, did you like the music in the movie?
I loved it. I thought it was great.
Did I lose you?
What did you think?
Oh, did you say it was great?
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I thought it was. I wouldn't be able to remember any theme, but I thought the fact that the music ran in reverse and ran forward, depending on the context of the scene, was like the super nerdy part of me was like, this is awesome.
Yep.
So I was thoroughly happy with Academy Award winner Ludwig Göransson's music on this movie. I thought he was in a series of department heads that weren't doing a great job in the movie, like with the attention to detail. I thought he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I thought the score was really good. I mean, what's cool is a lot of the melodies are the same forward and backward.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the impact of, someone playing a note is reversed.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool because, like, so the movie is basically as I was leaving the theater, I was like, if I had to summarize Tenet in one word, it would be palindrome, which is kind of sad because I wish palindrome was a palindrome. But, like, that was the
It's weird that it
behind...
isn't, yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's, like, just, like, the fear of really large words is, like, this, like, 26-letter word. But
I think the fear of palindromes is a palindrome.
I think, I think you... Ooh, okay. Rabbit hole. Hold on. What is a fear of palindromes called? It is abophobia. That is the same... No, it's not. Yes, it is. It's the same forwards as it is backwards.
Oy.
Abophobia.
Something. So I was also just looking up stuff on the movie. You mentioned that this had a new editor other than Lee Smith.
Yep.
The editor is Jennifer Lame, and I'm like, well, that's a lame name.
Who's actually, like, if
a good editor.
She's got, so it leads me to, because I was like, oh, well, she did, like, she did Manchester by the Sea, which wasn't, like, amazing.
Well, she did Marriage Story, which had good editing. She did
Midsummer and
Hereditary, which both have good editing.
And then, like, the rest is kind of, she did Frances Ha.
Whatever.
I don't know if that had good editing. You saw it, I didn't. So.
It's a fine movie.
But like, she worked in television and stuff. So, like, I wonder if it is just like Christopher Nolan, because all of his movies are very heavily edited and cut, and missing frames of information between moments and things like that. I don't know. Like, I feel bad because I could talk about things like I did the things that I liked about the ending that would keep me watching it do not keep me engaged for the 20-minute ending that it needs to be. So what I mean by that is the actual, like, gimmick of the movie, where at certain points characters go forward and the rest of the world goes backwards as they have, like, a breathing apparatus on, I thought was really cool. And in the end scene, it is really cool to see kind of how the movie scales up from, like, the first fight scene to then it moves to, like, John David Washington driving in a car where they're like, oh, it has Grand Theft Auto 4 physics instead of Grand Theft Auto 5 physics, to then, like, they have to crash the plane in reverse. Like, the way that it scales is really cool. And that kind of gets me through the first, like, 5 minutes of the last scene. But then I started, like, looking around on the scenes that were going in reverse, and I was like, oh, but that's not going in reverse. What the fuck, movie? And, oh, that's not going in reverse. What the fuck, movie? So, like, it's kind of like how Christopher Nolan's movies tend to beg asking more questions, whether he wants them to or not, because of the way he explains things in them. That's what my excuse is using. Like, his movies are open to that sort of thing when he's like, oh, well, I'm not using visual effects in that way, but I am going to try and create this world that has complete, it's like a complete reversal of what has happened before. Time's running backwards. It's like, yeah, but those dust particles are not running backwards, Christopher Nolan. You had an extra 3 months to release the movie. Why didn't you fix that, Christopher Nolan? But, like, the ending scene, I do agree, is too long, and it is too confusing, and it does bring the movie down a lot, because I look back and I'm like, ugh, the opening scene I didn't like, the ending scene I didn't like.
So it really does come full circle.
Yeah, it really like, the only thing that would have been better is if, like, after he assassinated the woman in the car, like, we see him, like, running forward, tackling himself, painting himself in whiteface, and feeding himself a cyanide capsule. And then, like, the whole thing would have come, like, full circle. I'm like, oh my god, it is a palindrome. But
well, I really
George
thought
Lucas circles here.
I thought the final action sequence was going to be they revisit the opera house. I thought it was going to be a redux of the first action sequence at the opening of the movie, and I was kind of disappointed that it wasn't.
I don't know if I would have liked that better or worse, just because, like, that opening scene, it felt like it was in there just because he needed to get the audience engaged in the action. And, like, there's very little aside from, like, a bullet going in reverse and looking at Robert Pattinson's backpack that, spoilers, that even though we've already been spoiling it, that comes back into the rest of the movie for the most part. You know, everything else is just like, that's why I don't like the opening scene. It just doesn't feel connected to the rest of the movie, except that that's how John David Washington, quote, died, unquote, and then got revived. Also, I think someone needs to do like a supercut of how many times John David Washington is doing pull-ups in the movie, because my God, every single time he had some downtime, he's just like, oh, where's a bar? Let me grab it.
Well, I think it's because his character, like the way it's written, doesn't have much of a personality. I think maybe that's a performance choice to inject it with some sort of humanity, like, oh, this is a thing that he does. So it's like, so if you were to describe, so it's like, you know, someone comes out of the movie and you're doing like a focus group test or something. It's like you maybe want to ensure that the viewers understood some of what they saw and could describe it to you. So you're like, well, okay, how would you describe John David Washington? How would you describe the protagonist? Well, he does a lot of pull-ups. And that's it. That's his character trait. He does a lot of pull-ups.
He does a lot of pull-ups, and he has a higher pitched voice than I thought he would have. I haven't seen Black Klansman, so I wasn't prepared when he started talking, and he was like, hey, man. And I was like, oh, my God, what the hell?
I've seen about 10 minutes of Black Klansman, and he is actually really good in that.
That's what I hear. I really want to.
It's weird because it's like, his character in Black Klansman, at least from the 10 minutes or so that I've seen, is supposed to be kind of similar to the guy in Tenet. Like, he's, you know, this charming undercover dude, but in Tenet it doesn't work at all.
Well, like, so I don't necessarily call Steven Spielberg an actor's director. And I also don't feel like Christopher Nolan is an actor's director. I feel like he lets the actors kind of do their own thing and will kind of rein them in when necessary. And that's why I said, like, it worked really well in like the Batman movies with Christian Bale, and it worked really well with Leonardo DiCaprio in Inception. But like, John David Washington doesn't go all the way to like 15 on a scale of 1 to 10, and so Nolan didn't have to like rein him in. He's just kind of like, I guess on that trailer when he's like, ooh, Christopher Nolan's going to introduce a new kind of protagonist, it was like, oh, you mean boring? And again, I didn't find him that bad. Like, I felt like there were a lot of times where he was trying to bring more to it.
He tried,
than like was actually there. But like, there were a lot of scenes, like every scene with him and Elizabeth Debicki, I was like, are they supposed to like be into each other? Are they supposed to just like be friends? Like, is he supposed to be like attempting to charm her? And then they would both stand up, and I was like, why is she like 3 heads taller than him? That was kind of distracting for me. But of course, she's like way taller than Kenneth Branagh too. So I was like, oh my God. But like, I almost would have rather him been even more just sort of like an empty vessel than when he was trying to put things into the character in some regards. Just because like there was really nothing there to hold on to aside from him running around and doing action scenes.
Yeah.
Well, now that we shit on the movie all this much, what did you like?
I liked everything that's not the ending. I liked all the time travel stuff. I liked the way it was represented visually. I liked the sequences where people from the past are fighting people from the future. I liked I liked a lot of the side characters' performances. I liked all of the, like I said, I really liked the heists and the way that they plan them out. I think there's a lot of sequences where the moment-to-moment editing does actually work, and it works well. And I like those. I think my favorite things about this movie are like all the different heists that they have to pull. So especially the first one where they have to break into that storage facility to get the drawing or whatever.
Yeah, that was really cool.
That was great. Like everything where they plan it and then when they execute it, it's all really cool, and the little twists that happen are really cool as well. You know, the way that the one Indian guy is like knocking out all the people on that plane. He's like, is this vegetarian? And the guy comes over to look at the food and he just smothers him.
He's good. Really, I like Himesh Patel.
He was good.
He's pretty good.
I really liked, the way that they use all of the security systems like kind of against the facility, if that makes sense. Exploiting them to have free time to search the place. I really like that big cart. I love the whole heist where they steal the plutonium as well, where they cram that truck with a bunch of bigger trucks, and John David Washington is like swinging back and forth on the fire truck ladder. And then the ensuing car chase I thought was really cool. I love the confusing interrogation scene because it's a classic Christopher Nolan scene where you go, what the hell is going on? And then they explain what's going on about 5 minutes later. And then I like when he first inverts and he kind of like experiences the world in a new way, going backwards. And then like does the car chase backwards.
Yeah. We can't guarantee how physics will react while you're going backwards. Like, oh shit, fuck.
I know. Like, I thought that was so cool. So there's a lot of really awesome stuff in the movie like that like pulls you in for as long as those moments last until something else comes along to pull you out.
Yeah. And again, for the record, the escalation of incidents and set pieces mimics the escalation of information you're getting. So in Inception, all of the information was pretty much presented within the first, over the course of an hour within the first hour. And then when they get into the dream world, they present it a little bit more here and there. In this movie, they tease it out a lot more so that they can use that to like create
mystery
plot twists and things like that. Yeah, mystery. Like, oh, why is the world running backwards? And like for the record, the plutonium they were trying to steal was not plutonium. It was like the algorithm, which has become like the latest in a series of really bad generic MacGuffin name things, and that really bugged me for whatever reason. Like they're like, oh, the algorithm. I'm like, this giant contraption is just like a math equation. So that like that frustrated me in a way that it shouldn't have, because I was like, Christopher Nolan, you're better than this when naming MacGuffins. Like you could have gone, you didn't have to go with like the algorithm. That just bugged me. I thought the thing itself was cool, where it had 9 slots that had to all come together to form the thing that would cause all entropy to, or what was it? It was it would reverse it so that, or it would change it so that reversed entropy was flowing higher than forward entropy, and therefore cause the ultimate destruction of the universe. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, because it's like up for debate essentially.
That's what I thought they said it was.
Well, so the Indian lady says that reversing the entire universe would destroy it. Kenneth Branagh says
against the natural order of things.
Yeah, or as Kenneth Branagh says, no, it would just make it go backwards.
Well, who are you going to believe? The person who's a really bad actor, or the Indian? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, and the other thing that makes it even
Kenneth
more
Branagh.
confusing is like the movie seems to imply that you invert certain objects. You know? So it's like, would the algorithm, would that invert the entire universe, or would it just invert planet Earth? Like, would planet Earth be going backwards while the rest of the universe goes forwards? Because it's like, the universe is a big place.
Right.
And you have to have a really big turnstile to invert the entire universe.
I thought that it reversed all, because like it starts off with individual objects, but the only reason those individual objects are reversed is because they went through the turnstile, and when they came out the other side, like they never got to another turnstile to come back. So theoretically, there was a person who was running around and shooting it randomly and like reverse handing it to John David Washington or whatever. But I think the algorithm was so powerful that it would have done it. It would have like made everything in the universe. That's what the impression I got was, the entire universe was going to be spinning on an opposite axis. But that's not clear, and it's intentional. It's probably intentionally not clear, so that they can, be like, oh, well, we didn't say one way or another. The top doesn't really fall over, or it does. It's up for you to decide.
Yeah, I think there needs to be I think for the movie to work, there has to be a a lack of clarity, because otherwise people
Right.
will think too much.
Like,
But then the other problem is like it begs so many questions.
yeah. And I mean, again, the whole, I'm with you on that. The whole concept is cool, and the fact that when you go through a turnstile, you start seeing everything in reverse, because that is the point that the palindrome shifts on its axis. So I do think that is a cool concept, and I was like, what are people getting confused about? This isn't that confusing. Like, at one point, you and the part of you that's going in reverse will hit the turnstile, but then you were right. Like, Kenneth Branagh comes out and like reverses time, and then he plays it forward, and he's like, blah 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 blah, and I was like, oh shit, I forgot about that. Does that really make sense? I should have been taking deeper notes on this. Jesus Christ.
So that's the thing. It's like, do you really want to be taking that deep of notes when you're watching a movie? Especially a big blockbuster that's just supposed to be entertaining.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, in my mind, Christopher Nolan did just enough legwork so that I was paying attention to it, and they were explaining it, and I didn't, like, it moved at such a pace in some regards that I didn't feel like I needed to think too deeply about moments like that. Like, I bought it for the most part. The entire time I was watching it, I was like, yeah, this all makes sense. Like, it all makes logical sense until the ending. The ending was the one part that I just did not. I was like, nope, you've gone too far. Like, the set piece is cool, but it's getting nonsensical. I don't understand what happened to Robert Pattinson. Like, is he going forward? Is he going backwards? What's he doing at this moment? What's he doing at that moment? Like, why, like, John David Washington, he's going off the reservation. Like, what's going on here? So,
Yeah.
oh, Tenet. But even so, like, he still makes a really watchable movie.
He
Like,
does.
for being so high concept, it's incredibly watchable. And I think, like, for the most part, even if the audience is a little bit confused, that's not a bad thing. But I just don't think it's, like, I don't even know how I want to end that thought. Like, because it's with a lot of Christopher Nolan's films, it's like, it's just high thinking enough that it can get people who are like recreational fans of hard sci-fi in, which I'm kind of considering myself. So
That's true.
I wish it were better, though.
Don't we all?
Well, that's the thing, is like, as I came out of it, I was like, the concepts are so cool in this movie, but are the concepts better than sort of the somewhat sloppy execution in the details? So, I don't know. Apparently not.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Any last thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
It's tough to figure out what to make of this movie. Like, I think it's definitely worth watching, but at the same time, it's such a mess.
It's literally a witness.
It's literally a witness.
Yes, you should see it. No idea if you're gonna. That's kind of how I felt. I was like, I wasn't sure which way you would go, because like, if you had come out and been like, "Oh, dude, this is definitely shiny and chrome," I'd be like, "All right, let me put on the armor and let's go. Let's get to it." But like, I don't know. It's I had a hard time figuring it out. Like, I would also like to know how Austin would rate it, because I wonder if I rated it too high. But for me, there was enough there that like, I wouldn't mind watching it again and seeing what I missed.
Yeah.
Should we move on to The Devil All the Time?
Sure.
I mean, do you have any other notes on Tenet?
No, like, I feel like my brain is just turned into pudding again talking about it.
I mean, the other major thing about Tenet is like, that was the other thing. Did this movie need to be seen in theaters? And like, in a weird sort of reversal, I do not feel like this movie needed to be seen in theaters.
Elaborate.
All of the set piece moments were pretty cool, but like, a lot of the stuff happens on a level where you don't need to experience the big IMAX in your face action. Like, a lot of it was shot in a way where it was like really close up, including the fight scenes, like that opening fight scene where he's meeting with Elizabeth Debicki and they take him to the back room of the kitchen and he beats the shit out of those guys. Like, the camera is so close in that fight scene that I'm like, oh, it's, you know, I could have watched this on my TV. The scene where the 747 crashes into the thing is cool, but like there's a lot of cut arounds to like close-ups and things like that. So I was like, well, okay. Like there was no scene like the opening, like aside from the last scene, which even then, after they get into the tunnel, there's nothing that needs that sort of like big screen experience.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't particularly like the opening sequence. So there was nothing really in the movie that I was like, oh, well, I needed to go to the theater to see this. It wasn't like Dunkirk, where like everything in Dunkirk, especially like when the bombs are dropping, those are amazing. When the ship is sinking in there, when they do the aerial dogfights, like Dunkirk has so many moments where it's like a John Ford film where it's enhanced. The vistas are enhanced by seeing it in a theater. Mm-hmm. Even in Interstellar, with like all of the stuff that takes place in space, you know, IMAX cameras were revolutionary because they allowed us to see clarity in space on the International Space Station and stuff. And they put that to full use in Interstellar, and even with like the long fields of crops and things like that. Like there's so much visually there. With Tenet, it's like the big gimmick is everything running in reverse. And for the most part, I didn't feel like their treatment of it made me need to see it in IMAX or you know in a big screen. Like I could have been fine watching it on a small screen and been like, oh wow, I still get the same experience. You had a different experience because you saw it on an even bigger screen than I did when you went to a drive-in. So,
but from farther away.
True, but still a huge experience. You know, it's still a huge screen, and I mean, your experience might have been different, but like to me, they didn't have enough, or there weren't, or just by the very nature of the movie itself and like the way that they confine their set pieces, like it never really felt like it needed that big screen treatment for me.
I mean, movies are always better on a big screen in a dark theater. I think it's, you know, I don't know if Tenet demands to be seen in theaters, but it's like it'll always be best seen in a theater.
Yes, I agree it's best in a theater, but if they had released it on VOD, I still would have bought it and watched it that way and been pretty much content. It's not as mind-blowing and to me as some of his other stuff as far as visually.
Yeah, so. I would say so. I mean, like the mind-blowing visual parts are not mind-blowing in terms of scale,
right?
But in terms of the effect, you know.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. The scale.
So, shall we transition to a movie that I watched on my laptop?
Which was actually, yeah. Let's do it. Let's talk about let's talk about the very watch at home Devil All the Time. What's your rating for it?
It's fine.
Oh wow. Okay. I wasn't sure where you were gonna go. It's weird. I'm gonna sound like a broken record for a lot of this. I think it's A Witness.
Boo.
Yeah, I'm gonna support it. But I think it's got interesting things that, because it reminded me a lot of like True Detective season 1, which True Detective season 1 was, you know, infinitely better.
That's interesting because it reminds me more of True Detective season 2, but go on.
I didn't see True Detective season 2. Everyone told me to steer away from it, but like I like the tone of the movie, how it's like really like kind of dark, to me dark, deranged, but still have that kind of like southern folksy sort of feel to it, even though everything was kind of demented. I liked the narration, although about 45 minutes in I could tell it was based, I was like, this feels like it's based off of a novel. Is this based off of a novel? I go in, yeah, it's based off of a novel.
Is it based off a novel, and is the narration just reading passages from the novel?
It was the narrator literally reading from the novel. Although,
well, the narrator is the author of the book. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. But I liked that it had the narration. I liked that it was basically a bunch. God, we're get into religion here, but I liked that it was like a bunch of like all of the demented things that religion causes, which I feel like they kind of always do in like a southern thing with like, you know, where it's kind of like the world is kind of grimy. It's not in a nice town. It's always in kind of a small town.
Also, I didn't realize Ohio was part of the South.
Yeah. West Virginia. It's close enough.
I did a bit of reading. It turns out Knock'em Ohio is a real place, and the author / narrator is from there.
And he wrote a bunch of short stories about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I generally liked the tone of it. I liked the feel of it. I kind of liked the pacing of it. I liked most of the performances, even though I felt like it had a lot of really good-ish actors who were there for like one day of shoots and then gone.
Yeah.
And it was, it was my kind of story, and I liked, how dark and depressing-ish it was. But you said it was fine, so you go ahead. You go ahead and tell me what you liked and did not like.
I liked Robert Pattinson. I thought he was amazing.
He is amazing in the movie. His southern accent is so great.
Delusions.
These organs.
These organs.
And that's what I'm going to do, friends. I'm going to eat these organs. Because I model myself on the good Lord Jesus whenever he gives me the chance. And today, he's blessed me with another opportunity to follow in his footsteps.
And it was like a bunch of actors who were known for like being fairly good looking, sporting really big guts.
Yeah, well, okay. So I loved Robert Pattinson in the movie.
Yes.
I didn't like much else, to be honest. I thought that the tone was, so like dark, depraved, crazy shit happening in a backwoods southern town is such a tired trope at this point. And the tone of the movie feels weirdly nerfed for good chunks of it, where it's like it needs to go harder on the like how just awful everything is, but instead pulls back because it's afraid of scaring people off. I mean, there's some scenes that are, very shocking, but most of the movie is not.
A lot of it is implied. I think it could have been like if they were more closer to the novel, it would have been like a lot darker.
Yeah,
I will say that.
So I felt like the tone was weirdly nerfed. I hated the narration. It's just useless and comes out of nowhere. And a lot of the time, he's saying things that could be filmed. So it's just like, why don't you just show me this instead of having Southern man tell me about it?
Southern hokey man. I don't necessarily agree with you, but I can see why you'd say that.
So yeah, I didn't like that. I didn't like most of the performances. Well, okay, I didn't like most of the men's performances. I thought all the female actors did fine. It seemed like a lot of the guys who are like known actors, not necessarily like the small bit players, were like, they all did the same thing. It's like, all right, I'm Sebastian Stan, and I have to play a Southern cop. So what am I going to do? I'm going to stuff a bunch of cotton in my cheeks, and that's it. Oh, I'm Tom Holland, and I'm going to play a Southern kid who is either 12 or 24. I can't tell. How am I going to do that? I'm going to stuff a bunch of cotton in my cheeks. Boom, there we go. And it's like, well, Robert Pattinson's and then frickin' Jason Clarke.
Oh, God.
Jason Clarke, he's like, all right, I'm going to play a Southern guy. How am I going to do that? I'm going to talk exactly like Jeff Daniels. And then Robert Pattinson's the only one who does anything interesting with his character and like commits in any way. It seems like everyone else is just sort of phoning it in. I mean, Dudley Dursley's in here again as a deranged bad guy, but
I know, I was
he
just
talks
about that.
Like his Southern accent slips into a British accent so often it pulls you out of the scene.
Yeah, he's incredibly distracting. Just like in The Old Guard, he's incredibly distracting here and makes me wonder, like, is he really that? Like, he should really stay away from these psychotic parts for a little while. We don't need to see that much scene chewing. Go back to the no talking parts of of the Coen brothers for a little while.
Yeah. I thought Bill Skarsgård was all right, but it's like, I just remember there's that scene where he meets the waitress who he eventually gets married to, and she's like, "You've got a nice face," and I'm like, no one has ever said that to Bill Skarsgård. Like, that man has a career precisely because he doesn't.
I cast him because I wanted to see him in a role that really pushed the boundaries of who he could be. You know, a role where he was an attractive man.
So yeah, you have all these kind of whatever performances. The story is completely disjointed. It's like no one, like, there's way too many characters for so little plot, and they all only show up to advance the plot. Like, they're not, you don't really get any insight into their characters in any way. So they're just sort of there and then they're gone, you know? Like, it seems like there's all these different storylines whose purpose is purely functional. You know what I mean? Like, there's no, you don't get to learn about their characters or about their psychology or kind of dig into them in any way. It's just, oh, we need something to happen. We'll have this storyline intersect with this storyline, and it'll be a thing, and then it just sort of passes and it's gone. So the whole movie, because of that, to me anyway, felt like really inconsequential. It felt like nothing really had any consequence. It's just sort of like, oh, there's those people. Now they're gone. Bye.
Yeah, I actually kind of like the fact that it's so spread out. Like, I like the fact, I thought that the way that they handled the non-linearity was annoying in the beginning, because in
the beginning it's really bad.
It's like, it starts with the kid, and he's praying at the thing with his dad, and then it jumps back to when his dad was in the war, and like on the cross there's this dead guy and he shoots him, and then he loses God, and then he goes back, and then 46 minutes in, then we're finally introduced to our main protagonist of Tom Holland, who in Tom
We're introduced to our main protagonist, John David Washington.
Well, that was one of the things about this movie. I was like, I wonder if this would have been like more interesting if like all the families were like black in the South, because it made me think of Lawless, how like in Lawless they would cut to like some black people going to the bathroom, and the bathroom was like covered in maggots. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I wonder if this movie would have been more interesting from like that perspective, instead of like another movie about a bunch of like Southern white people like trying to understand that religious fanaticism is bad. But like in Tom Holland's defense, Tom Holland's mouth is weird. And like in Sebastian Stan's defense, Sebastian Stan's mouth is weird. And also,
but he's definitely got some like crap stuffed in his face
to make it look like Jolly Ranchers and shit. Well, I think he put on the weight at least some of the weight naturally, because his neck, like he had like a huge double chin, and like Sebastian Stan has a double chin, but not that big. So I think he put on some weight for the role. So that might have just been his face adjusting
on
to
your
it.
Lower lip, like. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, I think it was in his cheeks. Like all of a sudden, I was like, "Hey, it's like looking at Mark Hamill nowadays, as opposed to Mark Hamill from Empire Strikes Back."
I just thought it was so weird that every time Jason Clarke opened his mouth, he sounds exactly like Jeff Daniels.
Yeah, I again, we go back and forth on this. Like, I don't understand how Jason Clarke has a career. However, I'm kind of happy that he takes these roles where he's just like, I'm creepy sex pervert husband guy, who also may or may not like religion. Because
who knows? Because nothing really matters in this movie anyway.
I mean, I did kind of get that feeling, but I kind of liked it. I guess this is pretty nihilistic of a movie.
I guess it's
to
weird.
Me, that's kind of how it felt. Is like there's so much like, oh, if God is like, God will tell me whether something is good or not. Oh, I do this, and if I do this, I'll pledge it to God. Like, there has to be some reasoning in the universe. There has to be this or that. And then at the end, it like ends with Tom Holland in Charlie Manson's car going somewhere.
Yeah.
Like that's
well,
just
like
I half expected his throat to be slit by the end and been like, okay, yeah,
that's a fitting end to this movie.
Well, I think even
it's
him
in
just
keeping
falling
with the
asleep
rest
and
of
being
the
like,
themes.
okay,
Yeah.
I would have been okay with. Like I enjoyed the ending well enough, even though I was kind of confused by it.
Oh,
But I also like Tom Holland a lot more than you.
And the ending was so bizarre because it's like it felt like you have all these intersecting storylines where nothing really happens, and they also don't really intersect. And then Tom Holland just kills everybody in all of the storylines, and then it ends. Like this, it's like this weird. Oh, we have to have something happen now. We're 2 hours in, so you have Tom Holland just kill everyone, and then you check off all the boxes. Like, okay, the story's resolved. We're all good.
Well, see, I like that all of the stories were disconnected, and then that they did all converge. And I kind of agree with you.
I hated that because not necessarily because of that fact, but just because the way they converge.
The movie executed it, yeah. Because I was thinking about like every time they would cut to Riley Ko or Ko and Riley Ko and Jason Clarke, I was like, oh wow, we're gonna go to like one of the best actresses and one of the least interesting storylines of the whole movie, of like these two people running around and like
well, it's
like
also weird that like, again, here's why the voiceover sucks. Like pretty much everything about them is explained through voiceover. You never see anything. It's like,
disagree.
Who are these people? And then the narrator's like, these people do this, their nicknames are this, foreshadowing. And then later on, it's
they
like
call their hitchhikers models.
And then later on, they like do something with no context, and you're like, "What's going on?" And the narrator's like, "This is why they did that thing. This is what they're thinking and feeling right now." And you're like, "Oh, thanks, narrator." And then later on again, like it comes back, and it's like, you know, Jason Clarke and Riley Keough are sitting in a car, listening to music, and the narrator's like, at this point in the story, Riley Keough is disenchanted with their lifestyle. And Jason Clarke, his whole motivation is this. And it's like, wow, thanks, narrator, because I would have no idea about any of that if you weren't there to explain it to me, which is why this movie stinks.
Well, I was going to say, we could just do a cut of that where like Riley Keough is just sitting in the car, looks over to Jason Clarke, and then it's the voiceover from Gone Girl where he's like, I just want to bash your fucking brains in.
But it's just like,
Again,
their storyline and how badly it's executed is emblematic of the entire movie.
Well, I don't agree with you. I don't think their storyline was poorly executed. Well, not poorly executed in as much as like parts of the rest of the movie were. I just was. It's weird because I don't think that, like, I like the narration in the movie. It helped set the tone, which again is that kind of cliched tone that you were saying, where it's like it's a tired, you know, Southern parable about how disgusting and yet beautiful the sort of gross beauty of
Hillbilly
the South
land?
and of redneck Central is. And like I just recently got into that sort of genre, so it's not super tired to me yet. But I thought their storyline was executed about as well as it could be. I did like that they had a bunch of different tangents, and I do think that the narrator was there to kind of help bring them along. But I think that the narration helped to kind of amplify as opposed to just narrate, because like he would start
I feel like
introducing
the narrator
it.
does all the work.
I think it's kind of complimentary, because there's that scene at the very end where she's like, she was thinking about getting in cahoots with this guy, with, you know, Tom Holland, and like shooting her husband and killing him. And like at the same time, it's not like it's saying like Tom Holland was nervous because Jason Clarke is fucking creepy. Like I think that they use the narrator in an interesting way in that point, and I like the fact that they tease it, even though it's a little like obtuse, how they tease like these two characters of Jason Clarke and like Riley Keough, they're going to be important in the future of this movie. We're going to tease it now, and then you're going to cut back to them so it's not as jarring. And I think it was executed in a way that was a lot more elegant than other movies where they would just like introduce these two characters like, hey there, hi there, I think you're cute. for some reason, I think you're hot, let's go bone and then murder people, and then like randomly it cuts over to them murdering people. Like, I like that they use the narrator to kind of tease things, or kind of like in a documentary how they would bridge time.
Well,
with like a voiceover narrator.
My criticism is like the movie barely works as it is, and without the narrator, it wouldn't work at all. I mean, I understand part of it is like a big theme in the movie is kind of that whole Magnolia thing about chance and like coincidence, where it's like, oh, you know, coincidentally, this thing happened on this day as well, and blah 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 blah. Yeah. So I understand that having a narrator helps to flesh out that theme, although it probably works better when you just have that one guy say the themes of the movie in a small anecdote at the beginning, and then just have the movie play out, like in Magnolia. But with this, it's just, you know, it's like, oh, you know, it wasn't just Bill Skarsgård who met his future wife today, it was also Jason Clarke. In the future, they'll be serial killers, wink, wink. And it's like, okay, whatever. And then they show up, and it's like, oh, these two, they're serial killers. I know that because the narrator said it at the beginning, not because of anything that's happening in the movie.
Yeah, but then that's immediately followed by them like picking someone up, and then later on in the movie they showed like the Polaroids and stuff of like, oh, these are all the people we killed, and here's a bunch of Polaroids of Riley.
Yeah, wouldn't that work so much better if you just had the Polaroids and not, you know, a folksy narrator saying things that either don't matter or giving context or giving all of the context to a scene that wouldn't work without it?
I think I'm gonna go with an opinions vary on that, because I thought it was good. Like it at least made it feel like this wasn't just a random side story that you knew was gonna end with probably Tom Holland killing everyone. But at the time, like, I
the most frustrating part of the movie. It's just you have all these stories, and then the only way they link up is Tom Holland kills everyone in them.
Yeah, but again, like, this is probably where we're gonna be just opposed the whole time.
And he kills them in the most like rote, mechanical way possible. It's just he
with
kind of blows into a
German weapon.
Well, no, he just blows into a place. Whoever it is shows up. He feels he gets threatened by them, and he kills them. Blows into another place. Another character threatens him, and he kills them. And it's just like okay, we're checking off the boxes, tying up all the loose ends, like the Indian lady wanted to do in Tenet. You know, for whatever reason, like, because there have been plenty of movies that I've seen where it kind of rolls to that point. I think of like The Departed. It's just like all of a sudden everyone's just shooting everyone and killing everyone at the end of the movie. And like that always kind of comes out of left field and never feels as good as I wish it were, which is probably intentional. I like the way that it happened in this movie. Also, you know, I got to be contrarian at some points, and I genuinely did enjoy watching this movie, and I, you know, even though it is kind of like a tired debate about like look at all of these like people who love religion, and then look at this person who doesn't like religion, and he's our clear moral hero in the story. It's like, yeah, that's kind of tired and old and stuff. But I mean, generally speaking, I like the fact that, you know, the main character doesn't, or Tom Holland, I should say, doesn't get introduced until 46 minutes into the movie. I was like, that's an interesting and a bold choice, and that's not something you see every day. I like that the movie really did feel like it really did feel like a novel. Yeah. Which again, if you don't like that thing, if you're like, oh, I'm watching it because I want to watch Robert Pattinson preach to the masses and get crazier and crazier and more intense, like, yeah, okay, I can understand that. Although I will say I did think that Robert Pattinson was kind of channeling his performance as Edward, and like, hey, don't you think Edward Cullen is creepy from Twilight? Now look, I'm going to do it again, but much better. it's like, that's what I thought of when I thought of him, because he's I never saw any of those movies, so I don't have any frame of reference, but
not necessarily his performance, but as far as like the character of like an older man preying on younger women, and how in Twilight it was like, oh, you know, it's this, and he's like,
he's
no,
thousands of years old or whatever.
Yeah. on poor Scout from the To Kill a Mockingbird Broadway show. I was gonna reference it somehow. Also, the Eliza Scanlon, the person who plays the daughter that is left with Tom Holland's grandparents, she was also in Little Women playing as Beth, who, spoilers,
I don't know what that is.
Dies. So she's just getting a career of like being this like really like, I'm such a nice person and then I'm dead. She's starting to become more and more like that person. Poor Eliza Scanlon. But yeah, Robert Pattinson is really good in the movie. Like he's, if you're gonna watch it and you really, if you want to watch him, you can literally just fast forward to his scenes if you really don't want to watch the rest of the movie, because
You really can. I think,
like, yeah.
I mean, I was going to say Tom Holland does a decent job. I think the only thing with his character that bugged me was it had nothing to do with his performance. It's just like, I couldn't tell how old he's supposed to be.
Yeah. I think in the book he's supposed to be 16.
Okay, because it's like I know Tom Holland in real life is about the same age I am.
Yeah.
But he looks like he's 13. And then his character like paves roads for a living and is always like smoking and drinking. So it's like, is he like late teens, early 20s? Is he a high school dropout? I don't know what's happening. Or how old he's supposed to be. And it never really makes it clear. Because the other thing, it's like, he does all this stuff, like he's got a job and he acts like an adult, and then like other times he acts and sounds like a kid. Like when he's confronting Robert Pattinson, and he's, Robert Pattinson is like this lecherous sex fiend, and
he's Joel Osteen.
He's Joel Osteen. And Tom Holland's character starts talking about sex. He sounds like a 15-year-old trying to sound cool.
Yeah.
It's like, kid, you clearly don't know what you're talking about. And it's funny because that's how the scene kind of goes, is he doesn't know what he's talking about. And Robert Pattinson's character is like, you don't know what you're talking about, do you, kid?
Well, I thought that was because it's the slow realization that that Tom Holland had been following him around.
Well, that too.
And
it starts off
initially
with him saying,
it's all like, yeah.
Yeah, it starts off with Robert Pattinson saying, it's like, do you know what you're saying?
How sex works there, buddy?
Are you aware of how this works?
He killed Robert Pattinson a lot earlier. Fuck, spoilers. He killed Robert Pattinson a lot earlier than I thought he was going to. I thought this was going to be like his big, like, I'm going to become a man moment, was like gunning down Robert Pattinson in like cold blood and stuff. But no, that happened a lot earlier than I thought.
I was going to say, it's not really spoilers because I already said he guns down everyone in the movie.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And again, it's like, maybe it's playing into the themes of coincidence and chance, where he just sort of happens upon other characters that he then kills. I don't know. But the whole movie seems like just disjointed and meaningless.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it kind of is, and I kind of like that fact about it. I mean, it just, like, again, it reminded me a lot of True Detective Season 1. Like, I really wanted to go back and rewatch it after watching this. Well, one, because, it's better than this movie. True Detective Season 1 is better than this movie. And two, it kind of, like, this movie, in parts, some of the religious stuff leans into kind of, like, the occult status, where it's, like, his father, in order to pray the cancer out of his wife, he like starts sacrificing things and like nails the dog to the cross and watches it rot and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, it kind of reminds me of True Detective Season 1. And like they have the serial killers who go on the run and like photograph people and then brutally not brutally murder them, just shoot them. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, it's kind of like the mystery of like the creepy guy who's causing all of these really vicious murders. And just like the overall tone, it felt like it was trying to strike that True Detective Season 1 tone of like country equivalent of like a crime thing.
Yeah, but True Detective is genuinely creepy, whereas this is like has one scene that's kind of disturbing, and that's about it.
I don't know. I thought it had like a couple of moments at least that were kind of like creepy or disturbing. And again,
I mean, the thing with this movie is it looks away from everything.
Yeah, which is, I don't fault them because sometimes your imagination can carry it farther. Clearly, in this case, they didn't set it up well enough that it did for you. But I go back and forth because to me there were definitely moments that were a lot more grisly than or like more raw than I would have thought. And then there are other moments that are just kind of like, it cut away too soon. Like, I'm glad that they didn't show any scenes of Robert Pattinson getting freaky with Eliza Scanlon or anyone else. I think
that's probably a good idea.
Kind of funny, but like it's good that they didn't show anything like that and kind of let it sit in your mind. But at the same time, they could have pushed sort of the creep factor a little bit further in those moments.
Well, because they don't need to push the creep factor for Pattinson because his performance is so good that it does all the work.
Yeah. But I would argue Eliza Scanlon does a good job too.
Yeah, she does. Like I said, all the women do a good acting job for the most part.
Yeah. Like when Mia Wasikowska's freaking screwdrivered in the middle of the forest and dies slowly. I was like, wow, I guess she's not in this movie a lot. Like, that's what I mean by, like, I feel like they wasted a lot of, like, either decent performers or good performers. Like, Bill Skarsgård's in there in a good amount before he freaking kills himself.
Yeah.
But, like, Mia Wasikowska's just like, she's like sketched in there. And they're like, oh, well, we have her for a day. Let's get her in quickly. Haley Bennett, she's in and out pretty quickly too. Like, there's a lot of moments like that of like, oh, we can get him for a day. All right, let's do it. Which I was like, oh man, they literally got them in there just so that they could put them on the poster and make it look like there was a ton of stars in this.
I know. It seems like it's also illegal for any Americans to play American like guys in this movie.
Yeah, well, except for Sebastian Stan.
Everyone else is British or Australian. And it's like, why? Like, why have Dudley Dursley when he can't even put on a Southern accent?
I miss fat Dudley Dursley. The one thing I couldn't look away from at the end scene was Sebastian Stan's nose hairs. I don't know if you could see them on your laptop screen, but I was watching it on a big 4K TV, and I was like, couldn't they have taken... It was either a leaf or, like, his nose hair just, like, crossing right over his nostril. But I generally like the roles that Sebastian Stan chooses, because I don't feel like he chooses, like, easy or glamorous roles in general.
Well, this is definitely not glamorous.
With his almost like with his hard to buckle up shirt because he's just so huge.
Well, it's weird because I feel like he tries really hard to sell you or sell the audience on how like debauched his character is, but the writing doesn't do enough, so it kind of falls flat.
Yeah. So, are most of your issues with the movie script-wise?
It's a little everything. Script, direction, performance, editing. It's not great to look at. There's no, like, the score is, I don't even remember it. Yeah. It's not memorable or interesting. Thematically, it's got nothing interesting to say. Structurally, it's a mess.
I don't agree with all those points, but yeah.
For me, it's like a whole bunch of blech with a couple moments that are really entertaining. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And the voiceover is bad. I don't like voiceover in general. The only good voiceover is if it's ironically terrible, like Harrison Ford in Blade Runner.
I was gonna say like The Lobster.
Or The Lobster. So yeah, I don't like this movie. It's fine because Robert Pattinson's in it and he's awesome. But yeah, I will say though, I've been debating this for a long time. Who is more annoying, Tom Holland or Timothy Chalamet? Tom Holland did a good job in this movie. He is no longer cringe. Timothy Chalamet is cringe though. He's oh god, watching the Dune trailer is just.
I haven't watched it yet. I want to see the badass movie where Oscar Isaacs is like a king with like a badass sword ramming down dragons. So I've just kind of stayed away from the Dune trailer because like the images that I've seen of him with like the giant beard wearing armor, I'm like, this is badass fantasy, like grimdark fantasy material. But I haven't watched the trailer for Dune yet. I don't.
Here's a brief description of the Dune trailer. Everything is either desaturated brown or desaturated gray. And you're thinking, can gray be desaturated? Yes, it can. Denis Villeneuve has figured out how to desaturate gray. Anyway, everything's monochrome, desaturated brown or gray. Timothy Chalamet is this annoying emo kid with a high-pitched voice, and that's it.
I actually like Timothy Chalamet for the most part in Little Women, but that's about it.
Oh, okay. In a specific movie.
Yeah.
Like...
I mean, I'm like, I can understand why they wanted to, after reading through Dune, I can understand why they wanted to pick him for Paul, but
I don't.
Because they want like
they want someone who's annoying?
Well, the only way I can really like rationalize it is if I compare it to Taipan. Because like in Dune, Paul is supposed to be kind of like smaller and not as intimidating in my mind visually as his father, who was, you know, this like really powerful, really strong, almost king-like figure. And so the only way you can do that if you cast Oscar Isaac as that figure is to get someone who's scrawny and miserable looking and looks like he can cut your throat in the night instead of someone who can bash you over the head with a 20-pound sledgehammer. So
I think the more annoying thing is that... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. That's it. That's why they went with Timothy Chalamet, because they wanted someone who was kind of skinny and gangly.
I was gonna say the more annoying thing is that like Paul's character arc in Dune is the same as Henry V's character arc in The King.
That's true.
Like it's identical.
Yeah.
So it's weird that Timothy Chalamet is playing an identical role that he already failed at in another movie.
They call me two-take Chalamet. The second take is always better than the first. Which is weird because generally I like the cast of Dune. I kind of like the cast of that movie. So
I like some of the cast.
I mean, I get, yes, if they had gone with Vincent D'Onofrio instead of Stellan Skarsgård, it's probably a lateral improvement. But I want to see Stellan Skarsgård in a bunch of freaking... Well, again, I haven't seen the trailer. I guess they probably do it digitally, but like put him in a bunch of like fat makeup and like make him like all disgusting looking. You know, like you could go back and forth on Zendaya, but I feel like the stuff that she's been in, she's done pretty good.
I'm just going to say I'm kind of glad that the brown desert-dwelling people are actually brown in this movie.
Brown people?
As opposed to just being more like white dudes for every role. Because I think in David Lynch's Dune, Zendaya's character was played by Sean Young.
Sean Young and brownface. Speaking of book adaptations, did you ever see, and brownface, did you ever see Cloud Atlas?
No.
Okay. Like, the only reason I'm bringing it up is because it kind of reminds me of Devil All the Time, in which, like, obviously the book in almost every case is better than the movie, which is probably going to be the same with this new Dune movie as well. But in Cloud Atlas, the book, the way that the story works is that it almost is like Tenet, in the sense of like everything converges in the middle, but like it starts with the far future and it ends with the far future. Next, it's like the middle. Well, so
future. I've read the book Cloud Atlas.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's like Memento.
Yeah, well, I after I watched the movie, I really wanted to read the book because I was like, oh, I kind of liked the movie. Well, I liked the Tom Tykwer parts of the movie. I wasn't a huge fan of the Wachowski sister part of the movie because like it was just very generic sci-fi to me. Whereas like the Tom Tykwer parts were like very, they were very genre goofy type stuff. Like everything knew what genre it was in, and it played really well. Especially the Jim Broadbent section was like very fun to watch. So like I feel like he had the easier section because it wasn't just like generic sci-fi that we've seen over and over.
Yeah.
But I like the format that I heard the book took, where it was almost like a fan, like everything came in and then expanded back out.
Yep.
And I feel like Devil All the Time would have worked better if it followed like the structure of the book and got all like, I think you would have hated it, but I would have liked it where it was like structured like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, things like that, which, you know, you're not really supposed to do in a movie.
I mean, with the structure of Devil All the Time is, I've read a lot of novels, and especially ones that were written in the past 30 years, and a lot of them are kind of just whatever. Like you get through them and you're like, ugh, whatever. And this felt exactly like reading one of those.
Yeah. In the sense of it's just like person wants to tell us, it's like indie film back in the 90s where it's like everyone just got a camera and told their life story, and like,
well, not even that.
For some
it's
people
just
it
like,
hit and others it didn't.
It's like you got a bunch of characters, intersecting storylines, jump around, narration that comments on what's happening. It's all very loose, and then it all ties together really awkwardly because you could tell the person wasn't thinking about how it's supposed to tie together. So they're like, oh shit, what do? I have the main character kill everyone else. And at the end, you're kind of just left going like, well, that was a waste of my time.
The only thing that I didn't see coming was, because everything else I kind of saw coming, I kind of figured that like, oh, the only reason we would have these serial killers is if, you know, Tom Holland met them at one point and killed them. I didn't see the thing about the sheriff coming. And again, I think they could have had a cooler gunfight than the one that they ultimately did have. But I did kind of like the way that was done for as low budget or location specific as they could. I did think of Best of the Worst, where they're like, oh, you can tell they had no budget because they just went into the woods. Used natural lighting.
Exactly.
But I mean, I don't have as big a problem with that stuff, even if I thought it was kind of predictable, because it like you said, like, oh, it's kind of, you know, just like convoluted and generic, and like I don't know if it's just because they spent so much time, or if you feel like it was just contrived, because I could see it being contrived, like, oh, he intersects with all of these characters at just the right time, like,
Well, exactly. It feels contrived and generic.
Yeah. But I mean, I didn't have a huge problem with it personally. Like, I'm not that interested in any of Antonio Campos's other movies, but you know, I pretty much all of the stuff that you hated in this movie, I either didn't have a problem with or I kind of enjoyed. So I guess that's where we stand on that movie. Time to stay away from Netflix movies for the foreseeable future.
Well, Netflix typically does not put out good movies.
I know, even with like some of the better directors that they get. Although I did go back and watch, like in various pieces, I went back and I rewatched The Irishman, and I still think it's really great.
Irishman's a good movie. I mean, I'm thinking of Ending Things is a good movie.
Yeah.
All the Cary Fukunaga stuff is good. You know, there's some good stuff on there, but most of it, the lion's share of Netflix movies are bad.
Yeah. I mean, they're no worse than when MoviePass was around and they had, you know, MoviePass original gaudy. So at least it's not that bad. And again, I understand I understand people not being a huge fan of movies like these, but at least someone is funding sort of these mid-budget movies. Also, The movie was shot on 35 millimeter.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know if the director of photography is particularly good, though, because they underlit a ton of scenes and they had very distracting film grain throughout the entire movie. So I was like, if they're shooting this digitally and putting film grain in it, it's very distracting. And if they're not, I don't know if they know how to properly set up for 35. Because they had so many scenes in the forest where it's like the indication of leaves is just like a high contrast shadow that they cast. Mm-hmm. And like I found that very distracting because I was like, I feel like this whole movie should look a lot better than it does. I was like, maybe it's just a digital thing. And then I looked on and it's like 35 millimeter. I was like, really? This is 35 millimeter? That's really awkward.
That is awkward.
But yeah, I don't know. I let me see here. Before we wrap up, let me see if I have any other notes. I mentioned Robert Pattinson's gut. Actually, one of my notes here was I was asking myself, what was this movie about? Because I didn't know if it was about chaos theory, about how like nothing really matters, like you said, or if it's supposed to like comment on death and evil. And yeah, and like you said, or like we've said multiple times, I think based off of the summary of it, the movie could have been a lot more intense than it ultimately was.
Yeah, well, it's just like there's a quote from a review that said it's hard to understand how a movie so sordid could be so rote. And I think that pretty much sums it up. It's like, I don't understand how a movie so like interested in like crazy shit could be so boring.
Yeah. I don't know.
People should just skip it and watch Tenet. If they have to pick one of the two movies we've talked about today, they should watch Tenet.
Yeah, I think I would agree if you had to pick one of the two, unless you already own Netflix, and because like going to a theater is, it's like it's a little weird right now.
Drive-ins exist, man. Just go see Tenet at a drive-in. You're not gonna get coughed on by anybody.
Not only that, you can set the bass yourself, so you don't have to worry about not being able to hear John David Washington.
You can screw around with the mix so you can actually hear.
Because he's like wearing a mask half the time. He's like,
okay, we're going to go into the comm center, and when we go into the comm center, we're going to shoot this guy. And
you're like, what? So count your blessings that you didn't have any problems with those, man. Jeez. Every time we put on a mask, the whole theater was like, ugh. Yeah. Well, we watched 2 new movies from 2020. And do you have any final thoughts after your final thoughts?
No.
It's been a weird year for movies.
It has been. Also, Tenet, I think, is like... I think seeing it, it's hard to think afterwards, and then talking about it, it's hard to think afterwards, because you're like, I don't understand who is talking to frickin' Kenneth Branagh in the future. Why is he talking about environmentalism at the most intense point in the movie?
Christopher Nolan just has a whiteboard of all of his ideas. He just writes down like, all right, what's popular now? This. Oh shit, we forgot the environmental angle. Luckily, we have the mother-son angle here, so at least this character is a little bit more compelling than normal.
Who's the protagonist? Why is he called the protagonist? What's the point of calling him the protagonist? It's definitely not like Snow Crash, where the main character's name is Hero Protagonist, but it's Hero with an I because he's Japanese. It's not that, because it's not funny. It's just confusing.
Oh shit! I was gonna say something about because like no one remembered that Ariadne's name was Ariadne, so he was like, instead of having them say his name over and over, I'm just gonna forego it completely. Although I have to think that when writing the script, writing the protagonist over and over and over must have been really annoying.
Well, but it's like, if you call your character the protagonist, there's 2 reasons for it. 1, it's intentional and you're trying to make a statement, or 2, you couldn't think of a name, so you used protagonist as a placeholder and forgot about it until you had already started filming the movie.
I have to believe it was intentional, but to what? But like, if it was only in those moments where he's like talking philosophy with the Indian lady, and he's like, "I am the protagonist of this story. You named me as such, and therefore I am the protagonist, and my name is now the protagonist."
And it's like, what is this even? What are they even saying? What does that mean when you say, like, why are you calling it like, we need a protagonist? It's like, what is that? What? Who says that? No one fucking says that, man. No one's like, hey, Bond, do you want to be a protagonist?
It's just like in Lord of the Rings, they can get away with like constantly calling Gollum a villain. They're like, "Hey, he's a villain." But if you're like running around in everyday life and someone pushes you over, you're like, "That villain over there." It's like the same thing.
No, not even that villain. That antagonist. Because they call the other soldiers, they call the bad guy soldiers antagonists.
It's like he wanted to be super pretentious, and this is how he could do it.
I know. And
I need to appeal to the layman and the pretentious man.
You need to think in new ways. You need to expand your mind, Neo, or whatever. And it's like, what? Like, what? Is he saying we need to think in new ways about narrative, about movies? Like,
you ask Christopher Nolan, and he's like, yes. Everything that is an all-encompassing statement about the art of cinema. And like, I could see him doing that as he's like climbing into galoshes and like going into the water to film the boat sequences. To your point, even Clemence Posey has a name, Barbara. They didn't just call her scientist, which they could have, or like Aaron Taylor Johnson. He has a name. I don't know if they ever say it in the movie, but he has one. Mm-hmm. It's like he wanted his pretentious cake and he wanted his commercial cake, and when he put it together, it equaled shit. As far as the naming goes, it did remind me of Invisible Man, though. Not Invisible Man the movie, but Invisible Man, the really thick book that you would read in English class, where the character doesn't have a name.
Well, but there's a lot of stuff where characters don't have names. This character has a name, and his name is the protagonist.
The protagonist. And you can tell it's his name because it's capital.
Yeah, and that makes it so much weirder than if he didn't have a name.
I was trying to think of another movie that I felt like I had seen. Even in I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and she's just the girl or the woman or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, with all of that said, we still recommend going and seeing Tenet. I think that Devil All the Time was pretty good, so I would recommend seeing it. But you can skip it if you liken your reactions with Gabe.
Yeah. Instead of seeing Devil All the Time, what I would recommend is going to underthewheels.com, our website, where we post a lot of articles, movie reviews. You can see if it's a little late for you now, but if you haven't seen Tenet yet and you want to get a review without spoilers, you can read Matt's review. If you want to argue with us or anything like that, our email is underthewheels@gmail.com. underthewheelspodcast@gmail.com, excuse me.
Correct.
Maybe you can help us figure out what the fuck is going on in that last 30 minutes of Tenet, who's where, what the geography is. Help us out. Our podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and YouTube. Make sure to like and subscribe and leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, because that really helps in terms of our like SEO and all that technobabble. All that Christopher Nolan-esque technobabble.
It helps with the algorithm, which may or may not end the world.
The social media algorithm. Fuck. Speaking of algorithms, like us on Facebook.
And music's by Mike, probably. We don't know yet. It should be. All right. Do you have anything else to add?
No.
Oh,
if only.
What?
Maybe sometime, like, far in the future where I finally understand what the fuck Tenet is supposed to be about, I can invert myself and explain it to me during my first viewing of the movie, so then I won't be going, what the hell?
That annoying person on the car next to, like the car next to you that was throwing like sandwiches at you to get your attention. It's like, or it's just like it's you from the future, but went too far in the past, so they had to wait a couple of days to catch up to you in the present, and in thus time has forgotten what Tenet is about. So they're just throwing sandwiches at you.
That huge guy sitting next to me eating the entire duration of Rogue One is actually me from the future.
trying to make you distracted so you don't actually watch the movie. It's like a sign that you should.
He was trying to tell me something about Tenet. He was planting the seed that would then grow into the idea.
I will say it was pretty fitting for me because I had to watch Tenet wearing a mask the whole time. So like when he's like reversed in the middle of the movie, he's reverse driving on like slippery roads. I was like, I feel you, dude. I feel you. Oh man. Oh, well, that is our show today. I am Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And you've just been Under the Wheels. Also, it's funny that in Devil All the Time, Chris Evans, I forgot to bring this up, he was originally cast as Sebastian Stan's role. And like the fact that Sebastian Stan like put on weight, I would have loved to see like kind of heavy Chris Evans like lumbering past trying to find Tom Holland and shoot him with a shotgun. That would have been pretty funny.
It's interesting that they traded one Captain America for another, basically.
They instead of American, they went Russian. Last thing, did you see I, Tonya?
No.
Okay, Sebastian Stan is like I thought he was pretty good in it, but like he goes around like a good chunk of the movie is like these really long like takes of him running like walking up intimidatingly to Margot Robbie and just like slapping the shit out of her, and I was like, Jesus Christ, Sebastian Stan, you do not like to take easy roles, do you? So perks of being the Winter Soldier, I guess. I was like, oh, at least it's not the robotic arm. Anyway,
I'd slap her with my normal arm.
I wonder if he actually hit her, because like Margot Robbie seems like the kind of person who'd be like, no, we need to get this looking right. Go ahead and just, as long as it doesn't dislodge any teeth.
Yeah, that's true.
I ain't got that John David Washington Tenet money. I can't repair my teeth.
Unlimited source of money from the future.
From the Michael Caine credit card. Oh, we'll balance the books later. When? Oh, never, because it's future credit card. You'll just go back in time and cancel all the payments on it.
I just kept thinking, like, when we were talking about it, how it's basically Metal Gear Solid, just, you know, John David Washington sneaking up to the turnstile and being like, finally, a weapon to surpass Metal Gear.
Wait, did you really think about Metal Gear Solid at all when you were watching it?
Not that much until you brought it up. I'm like, holy crap, he's right. It is just, it's identical to Metal Gear Solid. Dude,
it's got just enough hard sci-fi for you to be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then when they go batshit crazy, you're like, I'm already far along. Vampires in the real world? Sure. Fuck it. So yeah, that's what I was thinking the entire time. I was like, this is the Christopher Nolan Metal Gear Solid movie.
It is.
With John David Washington like lowering his voice, getting gravelly. He's like, I'm Snake. It's like, it doesn't quite work.
Finished.